WNST, Taos, real fresh, real fast. Make sure you're picking up that chicken and you're using the Rofo Rewards app and the card, one or the other, when you're pumping your gas. You get your Western fries, you get your chicken for free, and dollar coffee all the time. Justin Tucker's screaming about it at WNST.net on our website right now. I'm going to challenge him to a Baltimore Ease competition sometime soon as well. Also brought to you by our friends at Sporticulture. Have the beautiful flowers in here in the purples in bloom with the Ravens as well as the Maryland Terps. You go to Sporticulture. That's Sporticulture. Sporticulture, one word, .com. You can ship these beautiful flowers anywhere in the world. They're a click away at Sporticulture. Eddie Dominguez is also a click away. He has written a new book about the dark side of the national pastime. I knew a little bit about this because I had a press pass back in the 90s in locker rooms with the likes of Mark McGuire and Sammy Sosa. The author of the book, he's the author of the book. It's called Baseball Cop, and he's going to join us right now from a real baseball city where they're about to win 100 as we've now lost 100 in Boston, and I think the minute you hear his voice, you'll realize that he is a Northeasterner. Eddie Dominguez joins us here. The book is Baseball Cop. What's going on, man? How are you? I got a chance to sort of finger through this thing a little bit. You have taken a really investigative look at what was going on, not just in juicing and in these locker rooms, but guys literally breaking the law, and your background is in law enforcement, right, Eddie?
That's right, Nestor. Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
Go ahead.
No, Baseball Cop takes you behind the scenes. I was, as you say, I'm a retired Boston police detective, worked there for 29 years, and then I joined baseball as a resident security agent back in 1999. 1999, if you remember, was the year we had the All-Star game here at Fenway Park.
I was there, by the way. That was the only night in my life I met Ted Williams, so I remember that, yes.
So you remember Mark McGuire hitting golf balls out of Fenway Park into the Massachusetts Turnpike.
Well, those balls were juiced, by the way. If you did, all the home run derby balls have been juiced forever. Greg Biagini told me that in 1993. So the home run derby is a forced competition. It's cartoonish by nature, so...
That wasn't the only thing that was juiced at that time, though, Nestor, as we found out later on. So I give you the Baseball Cop takes you behind the scenes in the commissioner's office. It takes you behind the scenes at different events over the last 2 decades, including that All-Star game, the 2004 World Series. A lot of the book, unfortunately, as an RSA, or fortunately, takes you behind the Red Sox. It takes you behind the scenes with the Red Sox, because I was assigned to them. A resident security agent is the eyes and ears of the commissioner's office, but I was still an active police officer.
So you were working for Major League Baseball, not for the Red Sox, correct?
Correct. The RSA is a local active police officer in each city. You have them in Baltimore, where we are assigned to the commissioner's office, but since we work locally near the stadium, we are the eyes and ears for them in that locality, in that particular stadium.
Fair enough. Well, but you came in at the dirtiest of dirtiest time. It's funny, when I think of that era, I think of Manny Alexander being found with steroids in the dashboard of his car, and we all thought at that. Manny Alexander looked like me, dude. I'm 5'9", $150 soaking wet. I remembered him, and I'm thinking, man, how prevalent is it? Because that was one of the first incidents that I ever heard of a guy actually having a cop find him with narcotics and with illicit drugs that were performance-enhancing. It wasn't cocaine,
Yeah, Nestor, I was actually involved in that. Limited, because baseball right away told me to stay away from it. And he didn't have the drugs on him. They were in his car, and one of the clubbies, when the team was away, took it for a ride into a bad area of the city, and he got pulled over, and that led to the whole investigation. But I was part of that, and that's in the book.
Well, and I guess it's fascinating because I had a media pass back then. Angelos took my media pass in 2006 after I led the walkout on him, but I had a media pass for 21 years. And during that era, I was in the locker room every day. I traveled with the team most of the time in the mid-'90s. So I was in, my last name's Aparicio, bro. So, I'm into the culture of all of this back then. And I was a young guy, and I was the same age as it was Brady Anderson, as all those players. Ripken's a little older than me, and a couple of the guys might have been a little younger. But, I saw the womanizing. I saw the beer late at night. I mean, all the baseball stuff. But the thing about that era were the milkshakes and the creatine and the big tubs of powder that and every player was joking that their bowels were always loose. Then I started to see sort of the acne on the back, and then I started to see Brady Anderson go away for spring training and come back with 40 more pounds of complete muscle in one off season in 1993, 4, 5, 6, 7. And then I started to see the Brett Boones, and I started that Sammy Sosa's forehead and Barry Bonds. I don't know what point you catch on to this. But, dude, you were a cop for 20 years, right? And you came into this thing. How long did it take you to say, boy, this isn't as clean as I thought it was when I brought my son and daughter to Fenway Park back in the 80s and just watch Yaz do his thing, You
just said it, Nestor. I mean, it's common sense. You don't have to be a 29-year detective working narcotics with 26 to just pick up on these things as you did. What I was amazed at is the fact that baseball at its highest at the commissioner's office kept on saying that the problem wasn't that bad. And, those statements led to the congressional hearings in 2005. Obviously, Congress and a lot of baseball fans just didn't believe the fact that the then Commissioner Bud Selig and Rob Manfred, his right-hand man at the time, kept on saying that it wasn't as bad as it looked. And to you and I, you being in the locker room, be able to see these things, to me, I questioned as to, why were they doing this?
Well, why were they allowing it? Because the Players Association bargained for them to. The Players Association protected the players and used it as a bargaining chip. I mean, and at that point, and maybe time will still tell, but the players have owned the owners by the short hairs for, going back to 81 now, going back to free agency in the 70s. The players have gotten away with anything they've wanted to do. As long as they get to the field at 7:05 every night and get hit 35 home runs, they do what they want. And, I guess we're learning in the Me Too era and, what remains of this political administration into the future that, there are consequences. I don't know that other than the shame of it all and Barry Bonds having some legal fees, these guys have gone on and kept their $100 million. I mean, Brady Anderson's still running the Orioles and swears he's never used steroids. He'll come on the air and swear to that today. A lot of the players that were never popped will swear to it. Guys are in the Hall of Fame where you're saying, well, how did they get there? I know that guy used and that guy did. So they're leaving it up to sports writers to memorialize who was guilty and who should be feted and who should be maligned. And I mean, I remember when Giambi got popped, it was like such a scarlet letter, right? It's like, will he ever be able to leave the house again, right? McGuire's been working in baseball for a decade now, right? I mean, Brady Anderson's running a team. I mean, I don't know that there's any collective scarlet letter, and certainly nobody came and took these guys' money away. Now, if, their kidneys or their pancreas falls out 10 years from now, fine. I mean, that's the price to be paid, and I guess Ken Caminiti. But for your book to come out at this point, how long have you been thinking about writing a book, Eddie?
I've been thinking of writing a book since I joined the Department of Investigations. The department was formed after what we were just talking about, the 2005 congressional hearings. Bud Selig's feet were held to the fire by Congress, and he decided to hire Senator George Mitchell, former Senator George Mitchell, to do an investigation into PEDs. And his investigation that took about 2 years and millions of dollars and ended with a 407-page document, basically outlined all the different incidents that called into question the integrity of baseball over the years. And you just mentioned the fact that the Players Association, played a large role in this, and I'm not going to disagree with you. But even if you read the Mitchell report, and as I found out afterwards, and as I state in Baseball Cop, the Commissioner's office and Rob Manfred constantly blamed the Players Association for the PEDs. If you go back and read the Mitchell report, and as I state in the book, there are plenty of instances where law enforcement actually reached out to the Commissioner's office and gave them information, inside information, as to players using PEDs, and they decided to look the other way. So
why did the government not look the other way? I mean, if you knew these guys were dealing drugs, literally, across international borders in many cases, right? I mean, the Puerto Rican and the Dominican players and, Venezuelan players, I mean, B12 shots that Miguel Tejada, famously took with Rafael Palmeiro in 2005 and all that stuff. Why didn't the government get involved? Why did they leave baseball alone and not really embarrass them and put people in jail?
Yeah, well, as you can imagine, the war on drugs in this country has gone on forever, and it's at so many different levels with drugs that affect this society much more than PEDs do. So at that level, what they do is go after the dealers and not necessarily the players. Even in the biogenesis investigation, where I was one of the lead investigators, at least on the investigation part of the DEA was involved, not the investigation that the Labor Department was involved in Major League Baseball. When we went to talk to the DEA, that's one thing that they told us, that they would go after the dealers, which they did. They ended up putting Anthony Bosch in jail as well as all his colleagues. But they weren't necessarily interested in the user. And that happens a lot, especially in a federal investigation. I mean, there are so many drug dealers out there. To waste the time on an individual that's using drugs, it's really, they just don't have the manpower.
Well, and I guess at that point, they're trying to pop local guys selling steroids at gyms and whatnot, right? Like that on the local level in districts, that probably was an issue, right? Somebody's dealing drugs in my gym, right?
It definitely was, and it's been going on for years and years, and they do target drug dealers in gyms, even at the local or the federal level. We do it I used to do it all the time. But when you make that next step, and obviously it's like in a case like biogenesis, if the reason the DEA went after a drug dealer was to make a name for themselves for arresting Alex Rodriguez, that's not really what law enforcement is supposed to be all about. They're supposed to be taking out the drug dealer. And in this case, they did. Anthony Bosch was a guy that was not only selling to numerous Major League Baseball players and other athletes, but he was selling to high school kids and college kids. So that's what they target, and they were very successful in that investigation and taking them out.
Takes a long time, right? I mean, I just Googled this thing. Bosch went to prison in 2016, right? And he pleaded guilty in 2014. And this goes back. He was doing this in the 90s, right? I mean, like, it just takes a long, long time to get at the core of whatever's going on. I mean, look, 20 years later, I'm still trying to figure out what happened in the 90s with all of those tubs of special things that were making milkshakes in the locker room in Fort Lauderdale with Scott Erickson when I was down there, right?
Yeah, that's 100% correct, Esther. But on the Anthony Bosch, in particular Anthony Bosch, and it's detailed, that whole biogenesis investigation is detailed in Baseball Cop. I was one of two lead investigators myself, and decorated New York detective Tom Riley. And what happened there is that we started the investigation in 2012. Then the Miami New Times came out with their article in January of 2013, which caused then soon to be exiting Commissioner Bud Selig and Rob Manfred, who was bidding to become the commissioner, to try to expedite the investigation by forcing us to force the DEA to get the investigation done as quick as possible. If you're ever involved in a federal investigation, like you just said, Nestor, it takes time. I mean, we brought them everything from informants to go up on wires to special people that were dealt in performance-enhancing substances to actually teach the DEA agents how that whole culture works. And they did a great job, and they went up on a wire. But what baseball did, what the commissioner's office and what the Labor Department did, was exactly what the Mitchell report told them not to do. And that's get the Labor Department involved. The reason Mitchell came across that way with his recommendations is because he saw that the Labor Department in baseball deals with the union, with the Players Association, in their collective bargaining. So if you can imagine what Mitchell said is that sometimes leads to them not being able to investigate players, with the vigor that they should be doing it. And that's why we were set up to be an autonomous unit that worked directly with law enforcement. What happened in Biogenesis is that they took a different route. They hired investigators behind our back and ran their whole investigation and ordered us not to cooperate with the drug enforcement agents anymore. And the drug enforcement agents that we dealt with are in the book, and they'll tell you exactly what I'm telling you, that they couldn't believe all the roadblocks they got from baseball. In the end, it took so long to put Bosch in jail because Bosch cooperated with Major League Baseball in the arbitration hearings, and they went to the United States Attorney's Office and actually put plugs in for Anthony Bosch, a drug dealer, to stay out of jail because they cooperated with them in the suspension of players.
He is Eddie Dominguez. The book is Baseball Cop. You can find it. You can Google it. Just Google Eddie Dominguez, Baseball Cop, the dark side of America's national pastime. Your background in all of this and why you wrote the book now, and you're just a Boston cop, right, who loved the Red Sox and retired, and they tapped you on the shoulder and said, hey, do you want to come and be a part of this? And I guess the story picks up from there, right?
Yeah, Nestor. I was born in Cuba, so baseball is in my blood. I came here when I was 10, moved into Boston, became a police officer. I've always loved sports in general, all sports. I think I taught all my kids growing up to participate in sports for many reasons. I think that sports teaches you a lot of lessons in life, teaches you how to compete, it teaches you how to respect, how to work hard, how to learn to win, and more importantly, how to adjust to losing. And I always taught my kids. I coached. Two of my boys played college. One of them played professionally. And, I always taught them just to work hard. I would never in a million years would have taught any of the kids that I coached that cheating, that taking performance-enhancing substances would be the way to gain an edge over another kid. And people that say, who cares? I understand everybody has the right to think any way they want. I just cannot see as a parent bringing up a kid, teaching them, life in general and sports in particular, to tell them that that's okay, that it's okay to cheat, to get an advantage over another athlete. I mean, I just can't imagine that.
Well, I think the real scandal in all of this, and, again, I've been doing this a long time and I was around it, were the guys on the fringe of the roster, the quad A guys, and the players that were going to be utility players or the backup catcher, just doing this to try to keep a job in Major League Baseball, that 80% of the guys in the room were doing it. If you were the 20% not doing it, you probably wouldn't be around for long because someone was going to take your job. And I think if you go back into the 90s and more serious baseball people than me could do this, but know how many players got shoved out of the game because they weren't willing to put a needle in their arm, and there was so much at stake financially. This isn't a $10 an hour job or a $20 an hour job or the difference between making $75,000 or $100,000 a year. This is the difference between getting $100 million, generational money or not, based on whether you could hit a home run or whether you couldn't. And that's why I found the Manny Alexander thing to be so strange at that time, because he was a guy I knew. He was a guy that was supposed to be the next coming. He was also a slightly built guy. And I remember how hard it was on those guys that if they didn't cheat, they weren't going to stick around. And the psychology of that for 23, 24, 25-year-old men who've worked their whole lives, I don't know that cheating in baseball, if you think of sign stealing and you think of throwing at guys' heads and all the unwritten rules and all of that nonsense that's already baked into baseball, that, this was sort of the next step, do it and don't tell anybody you do it, and maybe you'll hit 35 home runs or make $100 million.
Yeah, you're right, Nestor. And in Baseball Cop, we talk about PEDs in general, and, baseball always says that, they have the best drug testing. And Anthony Bosch, who ended up being their expert in the arbitration hearings, is quoted in our book. We went and interviewed him. And he basically says, yeah, baseball has the best of a very bad system. And he proved it. In Biogenesis, there were 14 guys suspended. Only one of them tested positive. A-Rod never tested positive, ever. And, everybody knows that he used it for a long period of time and never tested positive. One of the things that we did when we were put together is that, we did investigations the old-fashioned way, boots on the ground, talk to people, get informants. And one of the first cases that we did was a player, and Baseball Cop talks about this particular case, player by the name of Jordan Schaefer, who was an up-and-coming player in the Atlanta Braves organization. And how we got him is very similar to what you were just talking about, Nestor. We had a 1-800 line, and we got a call from an agent, anonymous agent, who told us that he had a player in the Atlanta Braves system who had been there for a few years. And if you're familiar with what they make, the amount of money they make in the minor leagues, it's like incredibly. I don't know how they survive.
Yeah. I mean, they're eating ramen noodles, literally. I mean, still to this day, there's no money for anyone except the people who make it, literally.
And that goes back to the antitrust exemption that Major League Baseball has. And if it wasn't for that, these players would be making a lot more money, the same as scouts and everything else. But so going back to Schaefer, so we get the call, and he tells us that one of his players wants to complain about Jordan Schaefer because he's not only is he using HGH, but he's going around the locker room and telling everybody that they're stupid for not using it. So we interviewed about 100 different people in the case, and we ended up suspending him with a non-analytical investigation. And it was the first of its kind. He was suspended for the use of HGH, but it was done the old-fashioned way. It wasn't testing. The testing would have never caught him. And that's the kind of thing that, when they get rid of our outfit, the Department of Investigation, it's just not being done now. It just isn't.
He is Eddie Dominguez, Baseball Cop, and go check out the book. Man, I could sit here and talk all day with you about all this stuff because I'm fascinated by it and why it's allowed and how it's going on and how some guys have worn a scarlet letter and other guys. I mean, think about Jordan Schaefer. He's still sort of banging around. He's 31 years old. He sort of kind of has made it, right? I mean, he's been in the big leagues long enough back and forth, but I remember his name as a footnote. That was a decade ago. And we're still talking about whether it's clean or do you believe it's clean? When you watch a baseball game, what does your mind tell you about these guys? I think it's cleaner, and you know why I think it's cleaner? I was at the All-Star game 7 weeks ago, and it's the first time I've had a press pass at a baseball game in several years, and I'm walking amongst all of the stars. They all look like me. They all look like normal guys again. It was kind of an amazing thing when I had these pictures of me at the All-Star game back in 99, 2000, 2001. You're talking about the Boston All-Star game. Everybody looked like Popeye, literally. Everybody in a picture looked like Popeye.
Yeah, don't be fooled by that. I mean, HGH is the big drug now, and basically it's used for recovery more so than anything. I mean, go back to Manny Alexander. You were just talking about him a minute ago. I mean, there was PEDs in his car. You said it earlier. Manny was the same size as you were. And, and obviously, well, not obviously because it was never proven, but there were PEDs found in his car. I think that you see, and according to people like Anthony Bosch, again, expert witness for Major League Baseball, he's quoted in the book, Baseball Cop, as saying that he believes 70% of Major League Baseball players are using PEDs. My estimate from talking to numerous people like Anthony Bosch, from just being around baseball, from my 29 years experience as a Boston police detective and the 26 working narcotics, is that approximately 20%, I would say, of baseball players. And I think you have a sport that's even higher. But I would say that approximately 20% of baseball players are using PEDs.
Well, I remember when Kurt Schilling had one number, then it was a different number by the time he got to Congress, right? And I remember when Rafael Palmeiro wagged his finger, and, him wagging his finger and then him getting popped right after that all kind of goes hand in hand. And, maybe you could shed some light on that because I know how unpopular a player he was when he played here because I dealt with it. I was in the locker room. I know how the teammates felt about him. I know why. He sort of got ratted out, I thought. And, I think there's a little bit of that going on, too, to your point of ratting out a player who's walking around the locker room bragging about HGH. How about the guy that walks around and points his finger at everybody else and says, I didn't use, and everybody in the room knows he used, right?
Yeah, Nestor, you're right. I was there. That's in Baseball Cop. I was there during those congressional hearings, and I couldn't believe when he did that. I really couldn't because, I suspected, as a lot of people did, that he was using PEDs, and obviously soon thereafter he tested positive. It's, I just don't know how he found it inside himself to stand there on national TV in front of Congress and wave his finger, knowing full well that he was using PEDs.
We got a president that does it every single day in front of the whole world, and, time will tell. Eddie Dominguez joins us here. Baseball Cop is the book. Congratulations on getting the book out. I've written a couple myself. I know from soup to nuts, it's one of the hardest things, like giving birth, right? But now that it's out, enjoy yourself, enjoy the conversations. And, hey, now that I got your phone number, you might hear from me again, buddy.
Would love to talk to you, Nestor. Thank you so much for giving me the time.
You got it. Eddie Dominguez. The book is Baseball Cop, longtime Boston police officer assigned to Major League Baseball 2 decades ago, and a wealth of information on a topic that I always like to talk about. I don't know why I'm fascinated with it. Maybe because I was in the inside of it, and when those guys were drinking milkshakes, I was stupid enough to believe them 20 years ago. I was foolish enough. I don't know. So I've always been interested in that. So Baseball Cop, pick up the book, check it out. I'm sure it's thick, and I fingered through it, but I can't wait to actually sit and look at it. The Dark Side of America's National Pastime. Go check that out. You can find me out on the buyatoyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. Just download the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. Our morning newspaper ships digitally to your email inbox, free of charge each and every morning. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. Guaranteed. Also brought to you by the Maryland Jockey Club and our friends at Laurel. We're going to be doing the DeFrancis Dash now next weekend after the storm. And don't forget, the Maryland Million runs on October the 20th at Laurel Park. Tech services there for any breaking news. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. And Dennis is here each and every Thursday driving you home, getting you ready for the weekend. Also replayed on Sunday morning, hence the Sunday Sports Voice. Now heard 3 to 5 here on WNST. I am Nestor. You can find me anytime, anywhere. I'm a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, reading books. I'm that guy. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports. Appreciate it.